Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Power Vacuum. I'm your host, Belmont. I'm coming at you today with a Outer Worlds double news feature. Or, well, I should say the Outer Worlds 2 double news feature. Um, as many of you probably already know, I'm a big fan of the Outer Worlds. I actually just finished recording my last video the other day, and I'm probably going to do a video dump soon where I just start uploading the last episodes until I get to the end. Once I edit them all, of course, in preparation for the Outer Worlds 2. But we have a couple of articles here from GamesRant. Haven't read through them yet. I like to do live reads, so let's start with the first one here. The Outer Worlds 2 feels like Obsidian's answer to Starfield. And I'm going to disagree with that. The Outer Worlds 1 was the answer to Starfield because that already did everything that Starfield was talking about, minus the dozens and dozens of planets. There's only, I think, maybe 12 locations you can go to in the Outer Worlds first game, but it did everything that Starfield was boasting, with the exception of customizing a ship, because you basically take over a ship as it is and you go from there. Starfield was kind of boring. The Outer Worlds has that Obsidian flair that's got that really uh you know dark humor, the macabre humor, and it's a really fun game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But let's get into this article. Despite some of their more obvious differences, Starfield and the Outer Worlds have been frequently compared to one another, as they're both narrative driven, first person sci fi RPGs developed by studios renowned for their storytelling, Bethesda and Obsidian Entertainment, respectively. In some ways, this makes the comparison between the two justifiable. However, there are clear differences, like Starfield's larger scale. We'll stop in the middle of this sentence. Having a massive world and tons of planets means nothing when every planet has three locations and vast swaths of emptiness between those locations. They could have taken everything on all of those planets in Starfield and made three planets that were each as big as Skyrim. And it would have been 1,000 times better. I'd probably still be playing it right now if that were the case. But nope, they wanted dozens of worlds with virtually nothing on them. It's a dull and boring experience when you have to traverse vast empty spaces on a planet just to get to the three interesting places on that planet. Or larger scale, the Outer Worlds' tightly woven narrative and each title's unique approach to gameplay are difficult to ignore. Nevertheless, it already seems the Outer Worlds 2 might be Obsidian's answer to Starfield, whether the comparisons have been warranted or not. Based on what has been revealed so far for the Outer Worlds 2, Obsidian's long awaited sequel looks to capitalize on the success of its predecessor by remaining faithful to its origins. At the same time, it appears to make some major improvements to its gameplay, progression, and world building. They could put Starfield comparisons to rest by finding a happy medium between the first Outer Worlds accomplishment and the groundwork laid by Bethesda's sci-fi adventure. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say what groundwork? The Starfield felt like a step back from Fallout 4 and Star and Skyrim. As far as story, exploration, size of the world, it felt like a step backwards, not a step forward, not a leap forward like they were claiming. The Outer Worlds 2 is rising above its predecessor Starfield comparison. Is this some screenshots? Let's go through these real quick. Some actual decent looking melee. I like that new weapon. I like this new weapon. Oh, what is this? Like a solar system? It's just like a sun cannon, a buzzsaw hammer axe weapon. Just taking some ideas from Borderlands. You can't now because they're flailing, but okay. Let's get back to this. One of the main things that has separated Starfield from the Outer Worlds is its massive scale, boasting over 1,000 planets for players to discover. Starfield makes it almost impossible for the average gamer to discover every inch of the game's explorable space, which has actually proven to be appealing to some. A grandeur A grandiose. I went straight French there. I apologize. As grandiose as it sounds, though, this world design was led to a feeling of emptiness in Starfield, as traversing each planet eventually feels meaningless without purposeful content to reinforce their presence in the game. Exactly. Doesn't matter if you have 1,000 planets if they're empty. Like, okay, not fun. And none of them had civilizations. It's the biggest problem I find with Starfield. I found that same problem with No Man's Sky. You're exploring these vast, giant areas, tons of planets. One of these planets should have like a sprawling civilization with multiple cities that you can visit. But nope, anytime there's a big city, it's like the only location that you can visit on that planet worthwhile. The others are just more dead, empty zones with a small little gathering of people in a camp. It's really annoying. Like you would think thousands of planets that at least two, maybe three, would be like Coruscant style massive city planets. All right, where are we? That's actually where the Outer Worlds has always shined a bit brighter, with a world that is tighter and more dependent upon its lore and narrative than Starfield's world is. That being said, the Outer Worlds is significantly smaller in scale than Starfield, allowing Bethesda sci-fi epic to cast a looming shadow over one of Obsidian's greats. Doesn't cast a shadow at all. Like, have you seen the Outer Worlds? It's so bright, nothing's casting a shadow on it. It's a shining Polaris. However, the Outer Worlds 2 is responding to that with the world that is twice as large as its predecessor, which ultimately enables it to feel somewhat closer to what Starfield offers without losing its narrative driven identity in the process. Starfield's scale didn't just come down to its exploration either, as its progression was even tied to that philosophy. At launch, Starfield was a whopping 82 skills for players to unlock, whereas the Outer Worlds only had 42. Now, the Outer Worlds 2 is deepening the role-playing mechanics of the first game by featuring over 90 unique perks for players to customize their character with. This will potentially put the Outer Worlds 2 ahead of Starfield in terms of playable customization, once again pointing to the sequel as an answer to frequent comparisons drawn between its predecessor and Bethesda's sci-fi IP. Finally, Starfield isn't without its own comedic moments, but they are far cry from what the Outer Worlds and now its successor offer. The Outer Worlds 2 has already gone to the great lengths during its marketing phase and showing one element that was always set it apart from the competitors: self-aware humor. Yeah, that's a trademark, well, not a trademark, a hallmark of Obsidian. The self-aware, the black humor, they know how to write good narrative jokes. And they probably always will as long as they keep a similar team. Where was I? Self-aware humor. The Outer Worlds 2 self-aware humor not only functions as its trademark, but also jabs at corporate structures and gaming industry. As one of the trailers mockingly stated, everything that should have been in the first game, more action, more weapons, and more graphics. In the end, The Outer Worlds 2 isn't trying to outmatch Starfield as its own game more than it is leveling the playing field a bit. Rather than going after scale for the sake of scale, The Outer Worlds 2 wants to offer surrounding sharper, more deliberate, and more consistent. It builds upon its predecessor's strengths while directly addressing where Starfield may have overreached, all without losing sight of its own identity. If Starfield is about breadth, then The Outer Worlds 2 looks like it's aiming for more depth, still expansive, but intentionally curated. And yes, that's what I've been saying. People would rather play a game that is more about story and more about gameplay than they would one that's huge with good graphics. You can have the biggest game with the best graphics, and if the story and the gameplay are subpar or suck, they will always fail compared to the game that's about story and gameplay with toned down graphics and a smaller world. Just that's it. I mean, I've talked to too many people that have that same view, and I think that would be it. Outer Worlds release date 2025. Yeah, they still haven't set the release date in stone. I saw a rumor swirling around about June 8th, which seemed kind of early when I looked into it. June 8th was actually the Xbox Direct release where they're going to be talking about the Outer Worlds 2. It has nothing to do with the actual release date for Outer Worlds 2. We still have not been given a legitimate date. Well, maybe we have. I haven't read this article yet either. This one came out a couple days ago. Also from GameRant, The Outer Worlds 2 already looks like a moral minefield. The Outer Worlds 2 has been gradually making itself more known here recently, showing off its improved gunplay, stealth system, and gorgeous new worlds. As far as the full extent of the Outer Worlds 2 story goes, however, the that much remains to be seen apart from its premise. I'm just gonna start saying "ow2" or "TOTU." TOTU takes players to New Arcadia star system, where they assume the role of the Earth's Directorate agent tasked with investigating mysterious rifts that threaten the colony's stability. I'm gonna stop right there. So this is already indicating that the Earth Directorate, the reason they never made it back, spoiler warnings for the Outer Worlds 1, by the way. The reason they never made it back to Earth and the Earth went dark is that they stopped over here to do an investigation because the Earth Directorate in the story and the lore of the Outer Worlds left the Halcyon star system and the space with the Halcyon to head back to Earth allegedly, but then they disappeared and went dark. So it sounds like they're going to pick up with the Earth Directorate leaving and ending up in the New Arcadia star system. So that has some lore implications just in that sentence alone. Where were we? These rifts have triggered a factional war between the ruling protectorate and rebellious scientific religious order. A rebellion, okay, that's a protectorate, and a powerful corporate entity, each wanting to either control the anomalies or close them altogether. Totu's premise alone makes it seem as though there will be some pretty tough choices for players to make during the game's narrative. Choices that lead to a multiple branching paths and different outcomes in turn. The various factions in the game all want to do something different with the rifts that have begun to appear on Arcadia, and until players find out more about what is causing these rifts, what they are capable of, determining which of these factions is in the right, quote unquote, may prove difficulty. Needless to say, Toe 2 is already looking like a bit of a moral minefield for players. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pause real quick. Obsidian is really good at doing faction wars and making tough choices for players, depending on which style of gameplay and how they want their character's motivation to play out. Obsidian is the one behind Fallout New Vegas, which is widely regarded as the best Fallout game in the modern Fallout franchise, i.e., the Bethesda era. And I mean, I agree. I think New Vegas narratively and story wise is the best. Mechanically, it's just the same as three and a little behind four. Four was not as fun. I still have about, God, I want to say it's like 300, 400 hours in Fallout 4, even though I'm like, it's not that fun. I don't know how many times I've gone through Nuka World because I love that place, but I digress. It's the moral minefield is something that Obsidian is very good at doing and giving you options that are weighty and make you second think everything you've done after you've made the decision. It may be tough to side with good in the Outer Worlds too. Well, if it's anything like one, good is very arbitrary and particular to the player. Let's see. One of the best ways to challenge players is a choice-driven RPG in a choice-driven RPG. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading today. Is to ensure these choices aren't easily defined as good or evil. Binary choice systems in games are often regarded as artificial decision making simply because those games generally encourage players towards good choices anyway. Yeah, this was the biggest folly of Mass Effect 3 for many players. Had Mass Effect 3 completely got rid of the ending where you made a decision and just given you the ending based on your character's actions, everyone would be praising it as the best trilogy of all time, right? Instead of getting to the end, and spoilers if you haven't played Mass Effect 3 or the Mass Effect franchise, uh, stop what you're doing and go play it. Especially play the legendary edition of the first one because they fixed the shooting mechanics, and then play the original 2 and 3. You don't need the legendary edition for that, but I think they all come together. It's irrelevant. But the end of Mass Effect story was A, B, or C. Make a decision, right? You have to choose one of these decisions, and it effectively negated all of the narrative points from the game before. Like all the decisions you made, all the choices you made, completely meaningless. A, B, or C. What do you want? Had it been oh, you made all these choices through the game. Your options are now B. No matter what, B. That's what you get. You get the bad ending. Oh, you did everything good. Oh, you get A, you get the good ending. Oh, you did everything perfect the way it was supposed to be done, the way the narrative wants you to do it. You get C, you get the ultimate ending, we'll call it, right? That would have been better for most people because the whole multiple choice at the end really does kind of kill the flow of the game. So I do get that. Making it non-binary, not good or evil, is actually really good, and it's what'll drive the story and makes games replayable. Binary choices regarded as artificial decision. Da da da. I already read that. Where was I? As such, it's important for choice-driven games to be a bit more ambiguous about their morals, to put more control in the player's hands, and give them more freedom over the story. Fortunately, based on what has been revealed so far, it seems as though TOE2 is heading toward moral ambiguity in its choices. Yeah, because the first one was very much like that. It was hard to tell who was in the right until a certain point. This is primarily due to TOE2's various factions, as those have been shown so far to have no righteous qualities about them, nor do they necessarily seem evil. Firstly, there's the Protectorate, and it's what TOE2 calls its so called benevolent rule. The way the game's description of the Protectorate phrases to make it sound as though this particular faction will have a thick layer of questionable character beneath its holy exterior. Then there's the radical religious movement that opposes them, which screams cult and all but guarantees some interesting perspectives on things. In short, it might be difficult for players to determine which to side with in TOTU, and that's only two of the factions. The Outer World 2's factions aren't enough to complicate the game's decision making, then its companions might do the job instead. Unlike the first Outer Worlds, where companions could die in battle but be resurrected later, companions in TOTU can die permanently if certain choices are made. Fuck. I wonder if they're going to give you the option to resurrect them in the way you could in the first one during combat with the inhaler. This means that players might find themselves stuck at a moral crossroads during a quest with one of their companions, potentially choosing whether to save their friend or sacrifice them for the greater good. Time will tell of those specifics, tell on those specifics, but it still makes for a weighty choice system and one that is likely to challenge players more than the first game ever did. Yeah, that's a replayable mechanic. That's the kind of thing is you go through a story and if you're dedicated to the story, you're like, all right, we do this, we do this, we do this, and then we deal with it. Sometimes players play things and they go, nope, I don't like the way that worked out. I reload it and they do something different. But if you're a replay guy and or gal and you want to replay a game and get as much as you can out of it, you stick with the decisions and you see how things end and then go back and play it again and do something different. Totu follows through on what it's apparently setting up, then players shouldn't expect to walk away from Arcadia with clean hands. Between morally ambiguous factions and possibility of losing companions based on difficult decisions, the game looks like it's shaping up to be far more complex than its predecessor in how it handles choice and consequences. There's still plenty of left to uncover what these rifts are and how deeply they'll affect the world, but if nothing else, Totu already seems committed to making players think twice before picking a side. All right, there you go. Yes, it is going to be more narratively driven. It's going to have harder and tougher decisions. It's going to be faction based, like Fallout New Vegas, which I love. I love that they're going to do that. I hope there's more than just two factions, though, because that's kind of a flip a coin option. Where at a certain point you're going to go, well, which faction do I want to win? That's the faction I'm going to follow. What decisions would my character make based on the character I design? If you're into that kind of role playing, but I understand that's a lot of info I just dumped on the Outer Worlds too. We're still awaiting the release date. Should be probably during the June 8th Xbox Direct. We might get the actual release date for this. Hopefully we do. And we'll know then. I'll cover that if that's the case. But that's all I have for these stories. This is your host, Belmont, signing out.